afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Happy to have you join me today. We are going to be talking about, let me go ahead and start the presentation, the AEM Component Generator. So real quick about myself, my name is Brett Birschbach. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and also on Twitter. And I am the VP of AEM Engineering at Bounteous, also co-maintainer of the AEM Component Generator and co-maintainer of ACS AEM Commons. And let me just double check to make sure that everything is sharing as expected. Are we good? Can anybody confirm that we are good? Fortunately, I don't have any confirmation. Okay. Sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure that everybody can actually see what we're doing here. All right. So anyways, that's real quick about me. As I said, VP of AEM Engineering at Bounteous, and we're going to be talking about AEM Component Generator today. So what is the AEM Component Generator? Well, obviously it generates components, right? So what are the pieces it comes with out of the box? Well, the first piece, and probably one of the most important pieces, I would say, is the sling model and exporter. So these days we should really be coding all of our components with sling models. If you're not coding all your components with sling models these days, please read my blog post on the Bounteous blog on AEM sling models. Why bother? I know there's a lot of people that are still writing some simple components that they feel there's no need to put the sling model. I disagree, especially with the AEM Component Generator. It's super easy to do. We're going to show that today. You've got the dialog. Every component needs a dialog, so you can author it, as well as the shared and global dialogues. That's more if you're using AEM shared component properties, which is in ACS AEM Commons. If you're not familiar with that feature, go ahead, check it out in ACS AEM Commons. We've got a design dialog. So every component should at least have a style tab on the editable templates so that we can add the style system. There's a stubbed out JavaScript and CSS library. This is kind of following the patterns of WCM Core components and how we put a site library and then the different directories there. We've got a HTML file. Well, obviously every component needs their HTML file to render it. And then not shown in the screenshot over here, but also it has the ability to generate some stubbed out JUnit test files. Before we really talk about this, some of you might be wondering, hey, I'm pretty good at writing components. Why do I need an AEM component generator? Well, my question is why do you want to be spending your time writing the bare bones, all the plumbing of the components? Right off the bat, the biggest thing with the AEM component generator is you're going to get less boilerplate code. I mean, if we go back to this slide here, we got 16 different files, 18 if I were showing the JUnit test files. Like, that's a lot of code that you just don't need to be right. Files that need to be created. A lot of it's the same. We do a lot of copy and pasting, but again, why bother spending the time doing that? Secondly, the AEM components, the practices for creating AEM components have changed quite a bit over the years. Although they've solidified in the last couple of years. And with WCM Core, I think we have a good pattern to follow that we can all kind of solidify around. And using the AEM Component Generator is going to kind of help your developers more or less fall into the right patterns. And going to the next point in terms of teaching your AEM devs to learn the AEM way. If you just bring in new AEM or new developers into the AEM space, there's 1,000 ways you could do things in any framework. And we want to teach them the AEM way. Again, Component Generator is going to help them basically do it automatically. And then lastly, when HTML hit the scene, talking 5 years ago now, but the big promise with HTML was that, hey, it's going to enable this front-end only, or front-end first development. We want it to involve the back-end developers. And then they added sling models, which added Java, and front-end developers said, hey, I don't want to touch Java. So this is going to re-enable that front-end component development. Beyond that, there's some housekeeping that it helps you with. It's going to obviate inconsistent missing properties. So take an image upload field, for example. If you put that into a dialog, I don't know, there's like 13 different attributes that you might set on that image field. And then you put that across six, maybe 12 different components in your code base. I'd be willing to bet that some of them are missing a couple properties. Some of them add a couple properties. Well, this helps clean that up. You don't have to remember the XML syntax for these things. I bet every single person on this call can write an AEM dialog, and I would challenge every last one of you to do it from scratch. I mean, no, we just copy and paste from old dialogs and change a bunch of stuff, which then leads to artifacts such as, XML nodes that didn't get renamed, things that got left over, a dialog that's holding the name of the old component that we copied it from, stuff like that happens. So kind of helps clean up all that stuff. So let's go ahead and let's just jump right into the demo today. So you've got the AEM Component Generator. So this is an open source project. It is on the Adobe GitHub, and we're going to go through some of this stuff today. But it covers some of the things that I mentioned as to what's all in the box, and then how to use is how we're going to kind of go through this. And I'm not going to be able to go through it at the detail that's in this README, but just suffice to say there is a huge README here that'll kind of take you through all the different options that you can turn on with the component generator. Here also is the Sling model blog. Like I said, if you're still making components without Sling models, please go ahead and switch your practices, which is going to be enabled by the component generator. So let's jump into the code real quick and let's use it. So what I've got here is I've actually got the AEM Component Generator project, and it's just downloaded, cloned from GitHub, nothing special. And the first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and build it. So you do need to build it. This allows you to, if you're creating a fork, you can create your own version, then build your own jar, or you can actually just download the existing one from Adobe and just change it locally. Build your own jar if there's any company intricacies of how you want the code to be generated a little bit different. I'd love to have some of that stuff contributed back, but sometimes it's like specific to your company, and therefore you can just put your own changes in there. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to grab this jar. And I'm going to bounce over to my project. Now, I usually have a little housekeeping area for component generation that I just plop the jar into, as well as my JSON configurations. And to start with, I'm actually going to demonstrate with the demo config that comes out of the box with the component generator. So I'm going to copy this JSON file and put this in here as well. And now this JSON file in practice is not going to be the exact JSON file used for your components, because what it is it's actually a demonstration of every single option that's available in the component generator. So in practice, you're probably going to take this file and copy bits and pieces out of it into your own JSON file, and then write your own. But first off, for every project you're going to put this into, there's some project settings that you want to get this updated to. So this first is the code owner, so this will be stamped into some copyrights that get put into the project. These next couple properties, these are things to tell it, where do I put the Sling model? Where do I put the test classes? Where do I put the component? If you're using the AEM archetype, a lot of that stuff is going to be pretty standard, so I don't need to change those things. Now, in my case, the component path, if we can see it down here, is AEM demo code gen base. So I'm going to get that updated. That puts my component in the right location, and then it needs to know my Sling model packages. So I'll go ahead and update that. And so you'll usually, again, these are project settings. You usually update these once per project. Now I've got the name of my component. I'll leave it as demo-comp for now, just for this test. The group that I want it to go into, so all my components are in Bounteous base, so I'm going to do that. And then the type content, that's going to determine which folder gets generated under here. Now we get to all the different options. So first we got the client library options, whether we want to stub out a JavaScript and a CSS library, and whether we want the mapping JS and CSS text files. That's basically because if you're using Webpack, you might not necessarily need the text files. Next is whether you want an HTML file, and then if you want that HTML file to have some demo HTML in it. So purpose of the demo today, I'm going to turn this to true. What this is going to do is it's going to add all the different fields. It's going to render them all into the page in the HTML and show me how to reference all the different properties. Sling model, you're probably going to always want that turned on, but if for whatever reason you don't want a Sling model, you can turn it off. I don't recommend that. Let's go ahead and turn on the test classes. Those are just going to be stub test classes that need to then be implemented by the developer. And you have the option of turning on JUnit 5 or 4. And then content exporter. So all Sling models generally should have content exporter capability. So I'm going to turn that on to true. Most of your Sling models for your components are going to be adaptable from request, but if you do want them to be adaptable from a resource as well, you can add that to this array here. And then technically you could turn on a generic Java doc. So if you have a requirement of Java doc in every single field and you don't necessarily want to write it all yourself, you can generate some generic Java doc for all the getters and setters on your, or not setters, but all the getters on your Sling models. And then we've got the configurations of the different tabs. So you can see we got tab 1 here with a bunch of different fields, tab 2 with a bunch of different fields. We've got a shared dialog, which has just one field, and then a global properties dialog, which again has just one field in this demonstration. So real quick, we're not going to go through all these different fields, but suffice to say there's probably, I don't know, a dozen different supported fields. Most of what you're using on dialogs is supported. So we got text field, we've got a checkbox, we've got a path field, a page field, and so on and so forth. So we kind of have the field, a description for little help text. You can add JavaDoc for your Sling model, the type, and the label. And then we've also got an attributes section if you want to add any random properties to your dialog field. So let's go ahead. And to generate this test component, what we're going to do, we got to run the Java command, Java jar. So you got all this if you're running AEM, so you don't really need to have anything extra on your machine. And then I'm going to reference the jar, and then I'm going to reference the JSON config file. And we're going to see that it's going to generate a whole bunch of files that we saw in the screenshot on the presentation. And before we do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and build this directly to AEM while we kind of take a look at a couple things. But the reason why I want to build that out, well, number one, save a little bit of time, but number two, to show that there's nothing I need to do to change these Sling models that get generated. So for a front-end developer that's coming in and doing this, this is really kind of a boon. Really kind of helps them do what they need to do. So let's first look at this simple Sling model. So in this case, in the demo, we've got a subcomponent from a composite multi-field. So a list of links that each have a path and a label. So we can see a Sling model has been generated for that link object. You can see it adapts from a request. It's got adapters of its interface and the component exporter, all the standard stuff that you'd see on any component, just like in WCM Core. You've got the injection of the two different fields as well as a resource, and then you've got all the getters. So again, nothing you need to touch here. If we go ahead and we look at the interface, pretty basic, basically everything that you would expect. The more complex component, the overall component that we're working with here, has a whole bunch of fields. We'll see we got a JavaDoc in this one because one of the demo fields had a JavaDoc specified. We've got JSON name that was a field that was renamed, and then the one that was ignored. That was all just set in the data config. That's all fully configurable. And then if we jump back to the real component, we're going to see we've got a whole mess of fields that got injected here. You've got the shared and global fields that get injected with the ACS Commons annotation shared value map value. And then we've got all the different fields that get injected. We've got also for an image field, it gets injected as a full Sling model. So you've got full access to the image model, gives you full flexibility there. We've got a list of strings. So in this case, we've got a list of colors that will be on the dialog. And then we've got a list of links, which are the composite multi-field. And you can see those are injected as an actual Sling model. And lastly, we'll see that all list fields are returned with an unmodifiable list wrapper. This is important if you're deploying anything through the Cloud Manager tools. You'll know that it actually gives you a warning if you don't actually have that. So let's go ahead and take a look. I know we haven't looked at component code yet, but we'll actually take a look at that in the browser. So first thing, we need to enable our new component. So I'll go ahead and do that real quick. Demo component, you can see it here now. And if I refresh my page, I can now add a demo component. So if I go ahead and open the dialog, we'll see all those different things that we had in our config are now able to be populated here. And I'm going to pop open the content editor here just so I have access to images. And let's go ahead and configure our demo component. So go ahead and add some demo content here. Okay, let's select catalogs, page field. Let's select the home page, sure. Bunch of tags. We got a tags field here, so we can go ahead and select multiple tags if we want. Date, let's choose the first of the month. Option 2, radio 2, number, I like 16. And then on tab 2, we can go ahead and add an image. Let's add this young lady here. Colors, we got, again, a multi-field, so go ahead and add do those. And then we have our composite multi-field, so we got multiple fields per item. So path, let's go ahead and choose catalogs. And how about assets? And then if we go to tab 2, oh, that was tab 2. All right. And so I populated this dialog, and the first thing we'll see is, well, what happened here? My component's not rendering. Well, first bit that you do need to remember is with your component, it's fully hooked up to the Sling model. It's got all the different things to render, but one thing is it doesn't know when it's configured yet. Just with any standard component, you generally have to configure how a component knows whether it should show the placeholder, which is what we're seeing right now in the browser, or whether it's fully populated. So I'm going to say, as long as this text field here is populated, we'll consider this component actually done and ready to be rendered. So I'm going to go ahead and push that out to AEM. And now if I refresh my page, we're going to see all the different things are rendered. So we also see that my shared and global fields don't have anything. So let's go ahead and populate those. Global property. There we go. And we see we've got the global, the shared property, text, checkbox, path field, page field, the different tags that were all set. Text area, select box for the, or as this was for a date, so radio, hidden field, number, the image, the list of colors, and the list of demo link objects. So this is really kind of cool. I know this component isn't the most sexy component in the world, obviously, but what it's done is it's done all the boilerplate code for you, and you get to pick up just where you need to pick up. So if we take a look real quick at what's all in here, we got the design dialog. So if we were to go to the editable template, we'll see that it already has a style tab that's fully written for you. The regular dialog. So first thing you'll see here is it might not be formatted exactly the way you want it to be formatted. So here's a real quick trick that you can do. Since this is deployed to AEM, if I go ahead and just pull it from CRX, it's going to then reformat this in the pretty way that CRX wants it formatted. I recommend everybody do that, whether you're hand baking these things or doing them through the component generator. Just kind of sorts everything consistently, makes for good, clean Git diffs when you're changing it. But anyways, you can see all these different fields are created here. Select, radio, hidden field, number field, our image upload field, and then your multi-fields are all configured here, done for you. No need to touch it. Client libraries, we see we got a fully stubbed out client library. These are just empty files, but it gives you the full structure that you need. With the disclaimers already built into them, if you want that type of thing. And then you've got the auto-generated category, and then you've got the mapping files here. Oops, the JS text that map those files. So it's all fully ready to go. You've got a dialog for your global properties, dialog for your shared properties, again, all generated. And then you've got the component definition, which puts it into the component group. And then lastly, the HTML, which we had already taken a peek at, complete with the template. That's why we were able to see the actual placeholder in the UI when it wasn't configured. So pretty cool stuff. Now in practice, again, this isn't a real component, but I want to do one quick demo here before we wrap up in terms of showing what something real might look like. So before this demo today, what I did was I actually looked at the WCM Core list component. It's a page list component that has a bunch of different options. We'll take a look at it real quick while this is building out. But what I did is I created a configuration for that component because it's got a very sophisticated, somewhat complex dialog. And we're going to show that we basically have all the functionality we need to do that already in the AEM Component Generator. So why don't I go ahead and let's get this generated. Reference the jar again, and then reference my new JSON file. So this will be the list config. So that's all generated, and then I'm going to kick off a build. And I'm skipping tests just because we have those stubbed out tests that were created that I don't want to fail. All right, so if I were to add the list component that we're going to try to mimic here, let's take a look at its out of the box dialog. It's got a select box for whether you want child pages, fixed lists, search, or tags. And as you choose the different options, so if you're choosing child pages, you've got a parent page and child depth. But if you want fixed list, this is just the multi-field of paths. If you want search, you got to choose your query as well as where you want to search within. And if you choose tags, and you've got a parent page where you want to search under tags, and then whether you want to match any tag or all tags. You can order by title or last modified date. You can have ascending or descending order, and then you can choose how many items you want. And then on the second tab, you've got a second tab of just these checkbox options, and they all have a description. So if we look, our build over in IntelliJ is done. So let's go ahead and add our new component to our templates. We should now have demo component list. And if I go back here, refresh my page. Demo component list, and let's take a look at the dialog. So right off the bat, this is, again, just from the component generator. We've got a full select of the child pages, fixed list, search. One thing you'll notice, we don't have the show hide functionality yet. So you see all 4 of these sections below here are all showing right now. That'd be a great feature for somebody to contribute at some point. Maybe we'll get to it. But anyways, for child pages, we've got the parent page as well as the child depth. For the fixed list, go ahead and add your paths. For the query, you can specify your query as well as the page you want to search under. For tags, you can choose the parent page as well as the tags. This is the tags field. And then whether you want to match any tag or all tags, you can order by the title or last modified date, ascending, descending, sorting, and the max items just like the out-of-the-box WCM Core list. And if I go to item settings, you've got all these 3 checkboxes, again, with the same description, help tooltips, I should say. So you can see it's pretty robust, a lot of features and functionalities there. So let's go ahead and transition back and wrap this up. But basically, everything that you need to do most of your components, especially simple ones. I mean, that was the super complex ones. Most of your components are going to be much, much simpler. And so the component generator is going to for sure have you covered there. Couple things, just make sure you remember as you're doing this. Number one, you have to set that configured value. There's no way for the component generator to know when your component is configured versus when it's not. So make sure you're setting that value, otherwise your component won't actually render on the page. Number two, if you are going to use the client library, make sure you embed it into your site's client library. This might be another great feature if somebody's willing to try to figure out how to get that automatically added into the site client library through a configuration. But for now, that's manual. And then lastly, just making sure that your component is added to the template, which we were doing in the UI. All these things are things that you have to do whenever you're creating components. It's not like any extra work when you're doing the component generator. These are just type things where we're starting to transition from, okay, the component generator did everything that you needed, just kind of all the boilerplate stuff that you don't want to actually spend your time doing. And now we have to transition to the stuff that's specific for your project. And to me, that's the beauty of it. Your developers not only save time, because they don't have to do all that garbage. But to me, probably the even bigger benefit is they code components consistently according to best practices. You don't have 5 different developers doing 5 different things. You don't have front-end developers that are coding components one way because they don't want to make a sling model, and then your back-end developers coding it another way. You don't have simple components coded one way and complex components coded another way. Everything's nice and consistent. The components are 100% ready to go. They only require your custom HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So you do the things that you need to do. Spend the time on your customizations, not the generic AEM stuff. We've got this. I showed this link on the Adobe GitHub, and feature contributions are more than welcome. Please feel free to contribute. What's next on our roadmap? Well, Bounteous has been throwing some ideas about a web UI. We got a real quick screenshot here. I know it's kind of small, but this is already kind of in progress. And we'd love to see some expanded dialogue support. It's already pretty robust. We showed the page list component, but some things that we'd love to see in there would be deep field support, so fields that are multiple levels deep, rich text fields. So a lot of times we just put a text component embedded on our parent component, but if you want a rich text on the dialogue, that would be a great thing to have. Field sets to be able to group fields within a single tab. Nested multi-field, so this would be a composite multi-field that has a multi-field within it. And then lastly, the Granite show hide functionality, which we saw, that was the one piece basically that we don't quite have that matches that page list component. Some code cleanup. So if you're just looking for an easy way to contribute, that's a great way. Just simple things that we can do in that code base to make it a little bit nicer for people that want to make contributions. Feel free to do those things. Maven plugins. Some people have been asking if we could have a Maven plugin so we don't actually have to build out the jar. I think it's a great idea. And then lastly, if you got your own ideas, feel free. We got a whole configuration mechanism there so you can add features, and whether or not everybody in the world wants them, it's fine because they can toggle them on, toggle them off. Happy to take anything. So with that, we will transition to Q&A. Okay, so I've got a few questions trickling in here. Let's make sure I get these in order. So in the case that I don't like the generated code, is there a simple way to update the template? For example, change the formatting. Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the reasons why we kind of took a simplistic approach where you go ahead and download, clone the repository and build the jar. Now, I think there's like 30 forks of the repository already, so I think people are already doing this. Even Bounteous has done this, where we got a few things that we do just a little bit that's custom to us, that we have a version of the repo of ourselves where we make some of those changes in that code base so that we can then generate the new jar and then distribute that jar to all of our developers so that they don't have to ever mess with it, and then it'll generate with that new format. What is the oldest supported archetype version? So that's a great question. It really doesn't matter what archetype you're using, and furthermore, you don't even have to be using the archetype. The configurations at the top of the config file that we set, there was a project settings. It basically gives you all the different settings of the paths of where you want to put your components. So because I was following the archetype, I didn't have to set. There was a couple of things like where the sling models are at. It was like under core/source/test. And then I also didn't need to specify like the base of where the components are at because it was under a UI apps package. And then, under there, you still have to set a few things that are custom to your project, which I did go ahead and set. So you should be able to fully configure it for anything that you're using. Let's see. Next question. How is the compatibility to AEM versions guaranteed when building the AEM component generator itself? So, the beauty of the component generator is it's really not doing anything to create, like it's kind of doing all the basic AEM type coding. So generally, we've created it for AEM 6.5 just because 6.5 has been live for quite a while. The components, though, they're generated with the generic Granite classes. The sling models are using all standard patterns, so it should be supported backward to 6.4 and 6.3 even. Technically, if you do need to downgrade the Granite versions of the fields, there is like a constants file in the project where you can go ahead and kind of change the mapping of what Granite resource types are actually used inside the dialogues if you need to do something like that, support an older version. And then going forward, obviously, there's going to be some, as things change over time, we might need to build in a mechanism to build in an AEM version so that it automatically switches things. But hopefully that stuff is mostly stable. We shall see. Let's see what's next here. Can we already update a created component like adding one more dialog field? Yes, you can. So it's not smart enough to be able to just straight up insert it into your dialog because you might have made a bunch of manual changes to your dialog itself. But what you can do is you can go ahead and you can regenerate. So I recommend keeping your JSON files around long term so that you can go ahead and just make that small change to the JSON file, regenerate the component. And what it'll do is any files that it's going to write, it's going to move the old files out of the way and put a date stamp on them. So it's not going to delete anything. It's not going to blow them away. And then you can then do a quick manual diff of the two files to merge in your new piece. Just because it's not smart enough to be able to, like I said, you might have made modifications to those files already, manual modifications. So it really wouldn't be able to automatically do it. It'd have to be pretty sophisticated to do that. Be a great feature if somebody wants to add it. But for now, it does it a little bit more manual way where it'll move the old file out of the way, and then you can diff the two. Do you think about combining your solution with cognified AEM code templates could be interesting for dialogue creation? I actually am not familiar with that. So if that is something that is a possibility, I definitely would be interested in hearing about it. Feel free to post something into the issues queue on the AEM Component Generator. And if you've got some ideas or some time to actually invest into it, would be real interesting to actually entertain a pull request for that. Like I said, it's an Adobe code repo. Everybody is free to contribute, so please do. And with that, I'm not sure I see any other questions. I think that pretty well covers them, which puts us right about on time. So I guess with that, we'll close out. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. Hopefully it was helpful. Feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn, Twitter, or email. You can always get a hold of me. Thanks a lot.